Arsenal are one of a number of clubs said to be keeping a close eye on Mathys Tel's situation. The Bayern attacker has been linked with Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea, Tottenham, and Aston Villa. So what's all the fuss about? Well, we're going to fill you in. Welcome back to the Scouting Report on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. But first, a quick message from our partner. This video is brought to you by Stocks FC. Stocks FC is the football stock market where you can buy stocks in your favorite players and earn cash rewards based on their real-life performances. To get you started, they're giving away 5 free stocks to every user that signs up this month, offering you the chance to familiarize yourself with the platform. Buy stocks in young players you fancy to prove themselves and watch their stocks rise, or invest in those you see as solid performers who will maintain their value. Earn weekly dividend payments every time your players score goals, make assists and play key passes. Your free loan stocks are eligible for payouts for a month, so why not give it a go? To claim your 5 free loan stocks and begin your journey, scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description. I'll be taking you along on my journey throughout our upcoming videos. Join me on the ride, Stocks FC. Hey people, how are we? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. The transfer window is almost shut. Arsenal are yet to bring in one of their transfer targets. We've heard just now, just before we've gone live on this edition of the podcast, that Sverre Nipan, the Norwegian that Arsenal have been heavily linked with, is going to be staying at Rosenborg until the summer at the very least. The deal has not been found that will see him leave the club during this transfer window. And so according to David Ornstein, he is staying put. Maybe we'll bring you some reaction to that a little bit later on in the stream. I have to say, look, I don't know a great deal about Sverre Nipan. So if I was to sit here and play the outraged card, I'd be just doing it for effect. So I'm not going to do that. I don't know a lot about the player, but I know that Arsenal obviously had that interest, and that, of course, across the continent, he is very, very highly rated. But I'm sure we'll get more on that, and I'm sure we'll discuss that in more detail over the coming days. The purpose of today's episode, or of this episode, I say today's episode, but I shouldn't say that because I might have to do another one depending on what happens later on in the day, if there are any developments around Arsenal and the transfer market. But on this episode, we're going to focus on Mathys Tel, the Bayern Munich attacker, who, as I mentioned at the top there, is attracting interest from a number of Premier League clubs. Now, what we understand is that Mathys Tel has told Bayern Munich that he wants out. And you can understand why when you look at how little football he's had this season. He's shown great signs of promise over the last couple of campaigns, and we're going to get into all of that and break that all down on this episode of the Scouting Report. Now, it's been a while since we've done one of these, so I'll just remind you guys of what the format looks like. We will start with the player's background and career journey to date. Then we'll look at some statistics. We'll do a little bit of a deep dive, and we'll try and make sense of those statistics. Rather than throw a load of numbers at you, I'm going to tell you what those numbers show me. Then we're going to take a very, very short ad break before we finish up by telling you what the eye test tells me about this player, and then we'll wrap up with a conclusion. So lots and lots to come on this episode. If I could just ask you, before we get into the thick of it, if you haven't done so already, if you're watching us on YouTube, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching us on X, leave a like, but also please come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel. That way you'll never miss an episode, and you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform too, if that's what you prefer. Lots of you saying that he's on his way to Spurs, etc., etc. We have heard over the last 24 hours that Spurs have verbally agreed a fee with Bayern Munich to sign Mathys Tel. But at the moment, as far as I understand it, the player has not yet made a decision on whether or not he wants to join Tottenham Hotspur. Man United are in the race. Arsenal are said to hold an interest too. So Mathys Tel, I think, is waiting to see all his options, and then he'll make the decision. I mean, I don't want to, I'm not here to troll Spurs, not today anyway, but you wouldn't pick Spurs over Arsenal, would you? You wouldn't pick Spurs over Chelsea right now. So I'm sure all of that is dependent on what other offers come. I think Mathys Tel just wants to play football. I think it's as simple as that. He's a talented player. He's shown real signs of promise in the past. And he probably feels like at Bayern Munich, the path is blocked. It's not easy for him to get into the side. That's why he's asked to leave. As far as I understand it, based on all the things I've read and the people I've spoken to, Mathys Tel is not a bad apple. He's not a player that has an incredibly high opinion of himself to the point where the minute he's not playing, he's going to throw his toys out the pram. He has barely played football this season, which is unfair when you consider what a talent he is. Now, Bayern might not be able to facilitate the amount of football that he wants. I think that is probably the case, and that's why he wants to move on. So this is a case of a player who wants to take the next step in his career and feels hamstrung, if you like, by the situation he finds himself in at Bayern Munich. There's a lot of competition in that front line at Bayern Munich, and he is struggling at the moment to get into the team. That doesn't mean that he can't go elsewhere and flourish. So let's get into our scouting report then, and let's start with Mathys Tel's background. Let's start with Mathys Tel's career journey to date. I'm just going to share my screen for those of you that are watching us on YouTube. So we're talking Mathys Tel currently plays his football at Bayern Munich. Contract at the club expires in 2029. He is 19 years of age, born in France as well, a French under-21 international with 8 caps and 3 goals to his name. But if you look at some of his statistics so far this season, in fact, forget the statistics. We'll come back to that in a minute. If you look at where he can play, he predominantly operates from the left wing. And I think that Arsenal in the long term do need to look at that position. Like, I don't think it's the priority today, because I think that it's fair to say we all need a striker, or we all want a striker before we want another left winger. We've got Trossard, we've got Martinelli, Sterling can play there as well. Not that he's pulled up any trees, but you get the point that I'm making. It feels like a striker is more so of a priority. According to Transfermarkt, Mathys Tel can play through the middle and he can play from the right-hand side. I think, based on what I've watched and based on the research I've done for this episode, that he is definitely a better left winger than anything else. I think that Arsenal, in the long term, do need to look at that left wing position, because it's been another, in terms of outputs, generally speaking, underwhelming season from Gabriel Martinelli. And if I'm being honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if Leandro Trossard was to leave the club in the summer. So, you know, there's work that needs to be done there. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but certainly in the not too distant future. If you look at Mathys Tel's market value over the course of the period from 2021 until now, where he obviously joined Bayern from Stade Rennais, his value really shot up around 2022, and then in June 2023 it shot up again massively by the end of the year to around about 50 million euros. And that's because he was scoring goals, he was coming off the bench, he was having a regular impact, and we'll get into the underlying metrics around all of that. If you then continue on, that valuation has dipped and dropped because he's not playing as much football. That's the reality of the situation. You can talk about all the other factors, but this is ultimately why he is not regarded to have the same market value as he maybe did a year or so ago. If we look at, as I say, his career to date, obviously he started at Paris FC as a youngster, made a couple of moves along the way before ending up at Rennes in 2021, playing for their under-19s, then made the step up to the first team before joining Bayern for a fee of 20 million euros in July 2022. And if you think about, let's say that he does go to Tottenham, right? I'm not convinced necessarily at the time of recording this that that's going to happen. But let's say that he does go to Tottenham. We're talking about a 60 million euro fee. So they'd have tripled their money on Mathys Tel if that's what they get for him. Obviously, the player has to want to go there as well. And I think that's where Tottenham might struggle versus some of the other teams in the mix. But that's his sort of career to date. His last contract extension at Bayern was in March 2024. And that was when his stock was really, really high. And I'm sure Bayern felt that he had a route into not only being a regular starter, but also nailing down that left wing position. Kingsley Coman's another player at the club. We've heard a lot about Kingsley Coman potentially leaving soon. So maybe that talk was fueled by Mathys Tel coming through sort of as his understudy. But yeah, this is where he's at the moment. This is his situation currently at Bayern Munich. He's asked the club if he can leave because he wants to go and play football. Simple as that, really. Okay, so what do the statistics then tell us about Mathys Tel? How good is this guy, and how does his reputation translate into actual numbers and actual tangible metrics? Well, there's a few things. I've brought up his FB Ref profile here for you so you guys can see it on the screen, those of you that are watching. But what does this tell me? I think, first of all, you have to look at his overriding stats, right? So forget the detailed bits, right, for a minute. Let's talk about the overriding stuff, right? The main stats. Look at it for what it is. Yet to score in his 14 appearances this season, but he's only played a total of 458 minutes. That's just over 5 games, right? So it's not a great deal of football. You can understand why he wants to move and why those metrics might just be a little bit misleading. In order to understand and to ascertain how good Mathys Tel has the potential to be, I think you need to go back to the past couple of seasons. 23-24 season, he scored 10 goals and got 6 assists in a total of 41 appearances. But again, the number of minutes is really, really important here. He managed that in just 1,406 minutes. So he managed 10 goals and 6 assists in the equivalent of 15.6 games. Okay? So that makes for much more positive reading. Again, I always talk about context. I always talk about when you're going with stats, making sure that you understand them fully. And I think it's important to apply that context when breaking this down. In 22-23, he scored 6 goals in the equivalent of 6.6 games in terms of the minutes that he played. Simply put, when Mathys Tel is on the pitch, he is a goal threat. He is a goal threat. He is a contributor. He is somebody that can hurt the opposition. Now, if I go through the FB Ref page, some of the things that kind of jump out to me: shots total, he's in the 93rd percentile. So only 7% of his peers get more shots off in a game on average than Mathys Tel. He averages, as I say, 3.57 per 90. He's clearly someone who enjoys adopting a shoot on sight policy, which I really, really like. He's in the 86th percentile when it comes to successful take-ons. So he's a dribbler, which I really, really like, and I think is really, really important. He's in the 83rd percentile for progressive passes received, which means he often takes up the right positions to be found. And he's in the 86th percentile for assists. But another thing that caught my eye was that he's in the 86th percentile, also 86 being the common number here, for aerial duels won, which means if you need to, you can go over the top of a block to find him. And Arsenal need to do that quite often. It's why I think Kai Havertz is so highly regarded within the Arsenal camp, because he gives them something a little bit different. I think Bukayo Saka's pretty good in that sense as well. I haven't looked at the numbers to make that comparison, but you get the feeling that there's a confidence that Arsenal can go over the top and find Bukayo Saka as well, who's a lot stronger than I think people give him credit for. So he likes to shoot. That's what the stats tell us. He likes to dribble. He often takes up the right positions to receive progressive passes. He's a contributor in terms of assists as well as goals. But as I say, his aerial ability in terms of winning duels is pretty impressive too. Now, these statistics, these metrics, they are compared to positional peers in the men's Big Five leagues and the UEFA Champions League, as well as the UEFA Europa League, over the course of the last 365 days. I would bet that if you went back 365 days, and I can't do this because I don't have that capability with the website that I'm using, but I would be willing to bet a fair chunk of money on the fact that if you went back a year, these statistics would look even better, and he'd be even more appealing to us when you break it all down. The issue is that he just simply hasn't played a lot of football this season. And again, sometimes people would look at that and say, alarm bells. Why? Why has he not played? Why has he not had? Why has he not had the opportunity to to play more football? Is that a problem with him? Is that something, to do with the manager? Sometimes players just aren't in the right environment. It's as simple as that. And to sort of use the lack of football as a stick to beat Mathys Tel with when he's playing at a very competitive Bayern Munich side, I think is probably a little bit unfair. I think he's a young man, and so I would have no qualms with sort of waiting a little bit for him to get to the level that we think he's capable of. But you're looking at potential here. This is certainly one that you'd be looking at potential with, rather than him being necessarily the signing for the here and now. And that's why, in an ideal world, if Arsenal could secure him on loan with an option to buy, I think that's the right way to go. I would be a little bit reluctant to pay 60 million euros at this stage, but I think the potential is there. I think that's clear to see. And sometimes in football, you have to gamble, don't you? As per FB Ref, if you look at the players that he is statistically comparable to, this is the list that you get. Luis Diaz of Liverpool, Noni Madueke of Chelsea, Rafa Leao of Milan, Adama Traore at Fulham. This was the one that jumped out to me, though. Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, now, of course, of Paris Saint-Germain. Amad Diallo, Mason Greenwood, Danny Olmo, Leroy Sané, Karim Adeyemi. What this means is that when you look at the statistics, when you break it all down, when you really go through it with a fine-tooth comb, his characteristics are similar to those players that we've mentioned. It doesn't mean he's as good as Luis Diaz. It doesn't mean he's as good as Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, for instance. But these are players that he is, stats-wise, comparable to. Okay, so that's the statistical part out of the way. Let's talk a little bit about what the eye test tells me about Mathys Tel. So I've spent a fair chunk of time this morning watching clips and compilations of Mathys Tel, and probably more time than I should have when you consider that, as per the reports, he's not probably... I'm not going to say he's not going to end up at Arsenal, but he's more likely to end up elsewhere. I spent, as I say, a lot of time, too much time watching him. And what did I take away from it? What were the notes I made watching Mathys Tel? He's a finisher with real conviction about the way that he strikes the ball. He's like a golfer with all the different clubs at his disposal. Need to lace it, no problem. Need to curl it with your instep, no problem. I think his decision-making is great in terms of his finishing style selection and the choices that he makes. I think it's clear to see that his first thought when receiving the ball or challenging in a duel often seems to be, how can I set myself up for the shot? And can I do it with one touch? Can I do it with two touches? How do I get myself from receiving the ball to shooting position? That's his first thought. And I love that positivity. The stats on how many shots he has in comparison to some of his peers, I think, really do back that up. And as I say, the eye test tells you that. He's a dribbler who commits defenders. He's got great balance. And I believe that dribbling is a dying art. It feels at times in the modern game anyway, but it's such a powerful skill to possess because it's not just beating one or two men. It's the panic that it sends through a team when a player can pick up the ball and run through a crowd. It's the panic that sets in that then causes defenders to step out of position. It causes that hesitation and the decision-making process between, do I go and help my teammate or do I hold my position? And if a player can dribble brilliantly, close control, and attract people in, and then has the know-how and the understanding of when to maybe pop the ball off left or right or pick out a pass, you can create so much room for your peers. It's unbelievable. So I think dribbling is really, really important. And I know I bang on about this a lot. But when Gabriel Jesus first arrived at Arsenal, right, and we were waxing lyrical about the impact he had, one of the things that really jumped out to me was the fact that this guy was so comfortable dribbling and was willing to run through the smallest spaces and dribble through the tightest crowds because he believed in his own ability to do that successfully. And then he could work it right to Saka or left to Martinelli or use Martin Odegaard, who would have been up in support alongside him. And all three of those players got 15 league goals apiece that season. And I believe Gabby Jesus played a massive part in that because his dribbling just caused chaos and havoc each and every time he roamed forward. And I think Mathys Tel's got a similar characteristic there. He looks like a street type of footballer. And those players, in my opinion, okay, you need to have a system. Okay, you need to have a structure. We know that's really important in the modern game. But those types of players, for me, should be empowered, not shackled. And that would be my only reservation about Mathys Tel coming to Arsenal, aside from the price. It would be, is he going to be allowed to be the Mathys Tel that I've just spent the morning watching? Or is he going to be shackled a little bit? Is he going to fall victim to the fact that we seem to prioritize system, organizational structure, and shape ahead of everything else? That would be my one concern. But I feel like at times this season, we've been crying out for that type of player, the unpredictable one, the one who is willing to do something off the cuff, the one who is able, to pull a moment out of nowhere, the one who doesn't even know what he's going to do himself until it happens, which can then, of course, make you almost impossible to defend against. I really like the look of this player. The eye test tells me that he's a big, big talent. Does he need a bit of nurturing? Of course. Is he going to need some confidence? Is he going to need minutes above everything else? Well, yes, that's ultimately, I think, why he wants to leave Bayern, right? People are saying in the chat, too bad Spurs have their claws in him. I mean, they're interested, obviously, but if that was a done deal, and I know I can only speak at the time of recording, things happen and change really, really quickly in football. But if that was a done deal, then he'd be on his way there now. The time's running out, but he clearly feels that there is other options on the table, and he's willing to wait and see what works best for him. In terms of my conclusion, then, bring him to the carpet. He could be the long-term answer on the left wing for us. I honestly believe that he's got that potential. Potential must be fulfilled, of course, but I've seen enough to believe that he's worth rolling the dice on. If you can get him in on a loan with an option to buy, I think that's the perfect scenario. And I think that's the right way to go about it. But you might have to do a little bit more if you're going to get him ahead of everyone else, in which case then I would think about it. I'd think twice. But just based on what I've seen, based on what I've read, based on the statistics that I've done a little bit of a deep dive into this morning, I think he would be a good addition. And as I've said already, I don't think Trossard and Martinelli necessarily are the top level wingers that you should be aspiring to have in your side. We've got a top level winger on the right hand side when he's fit in Bukayo Saka. We've got a really exciting prospect coming up behind him right now in Ethan Nwaneri. But on the left hand side, I think we've got two good players, but we're without that elite player. Now, I'm not saying Tel is that today, but he could be that in the future. I think that the ingredients are there. So that's what tempts me into trying to make this signing. That's what tempts me into trying to get him in through the door. Jid says, oh, Harry, don't tell me you fell into the trap of judging a player off just a morning of watching YouTube compilations. No, I haven't based it solely on that. I've based it on my prior knowledge of Tel, which admittedly isn't amazing, but obviously I had knowledge of him. I've seen a fair amount of him. I've spoken to a couple of French football experts who have been following his career very, very closely, who rate him incredibly highly. I've looked at the stats myself. I've looked at the clips myself. I'm telling you what my opinion is. I'm telling you what the eye test is telling me. I'm telling you what the statistics are telling me. I'm not presenting it as fact. This is just my belief and my view and my opinion. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a real talent. It would be a shame to let him go to Tottenham Hotspur. It would be a shame for him if he was to fall into the trap of agreeing to sign for them, of course. But, that's certainly in play at the moment. But there are a number of other clubs looking at it as well. And look, we all agree and we all know that right now Arsenal's priority needs to be centre forward, right? That's what we should be looking at first and foremost. But we've talked a fair bit over the last few days about market opportunities. Within the last few days, a very talented French winger who plays for Bayern has come out and said he wants to leave because he wants to play more football. Is he the one that we should maybe try and pivot towards in the absence of bringing in the striker that we all need? Because it's not looking good on the striker front. Let's be honest. We've got 3 days left? Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, the window closes. We ain't got a great deal of time left to do the deals that some people are suggesting. The Watkins thing, we'd love it to happen, but just can't see it at the moment. And I've heard nothing to suggest that it is progressing or moving forward. So maybe we have to pivot elsewhere. Leslie says, I'd go for Tel if we can't get a centre forward. I think that's probably the right way to look at it. Yeah, that's how I'm looking at it right now. I'm not saying he should be the priority, but he's a really interesting player. And I think if it's doable, we should be looking to bring him to the carpet. Just my opinion. opinion, I should say. Right, the Champions League draw is coming up very, very soon, so I'm going to love you and leave you. But just before I go, I want to quickly remind you that this video is brought to you by the good people over at Stocks FC. If you scan the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you can claim your 5 free loan stocks that will get you on your way. You can buy and sell players based on their real-life performances. Their stocks will increase or decrease, and you stand to earn dividends on those players as well. It's great fun. I'm hooked at the moment. I'm really, really enjoying it. I do want to make it clear it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, and please don't play it if you can't afford to play it. But if you can and you fancy it, it is a really interesting pastime, and I find myself constantly checking the prices of my players. As I've told you guys before, I've adopted a slightly unorthodox approach where I've invested in players when I believe their stock is low, on the hope and under the expectation that they are going to get back on the right track. And I'll see those values increase and the dividends as well increase in turn, as well as the value of my portfolio. Check it out, Stocks FC. We thank them very, very much for their support of our videos. Go over there, check it out, claim your 5 free loan stocks now. QR code bottom right-hand corner of the screen, or you can click on the link in the description. Right, gonna love you and leave you. I will see you all very, very shortly. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a good day. Get Mathys Tel to the carpet. Do it, Arsenal.